Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. This is Alex, and I'm here in the room with Eric and Terry and Roland Archer, who will be our guest speaker for tonight. Tolga's running the board back there and keeping track of everything, so it's good to have you here tonight. The first thing I want to do is turn off my sound, and um, there we go. And I'm going to start sharing my screen because I want to take you to what's coming up over the next little while here, okay? Screen share, share the screen. And I think you can see my screen now. On the screen that you will see, I've got several running here, upcoming shows. If you go to the top of the website screen, you'll find a number of options here, and one of them is upcoming shows. And you can see that we've got Roland here tonight, and Greg Crinklaw will be up next week with Sky Tools 4 imaging program. Rachel Freed's coming to talk to us. That'll always be a good show. Ray Gralek is going to appear again to tell us about APCC. Lloyd Smith is going to take us, where we had a sneak preview last week with Tolga taking us out to Deep Sky West. So we're going to hear more about that, and we'll be able to ask him some questions about what happens out there, how things happen, kind of what it costs, and all that kind of cool stuff. Anina is coming up the week after that. We've got an open date there. If anybody out there has some ideas, and we have had some good suggestions, we're looking for somebody who can show us how to layer in hydrogen alpha over an RGB image to really add to that. And if you'd like to help us with that, we'd love to have you come on in. And if somebody else would like to show off just, maybe 10, 15 minutes worth of techniques, not a whole show necessarily, not the whole 45-minute, 50-minute show that we usually ask of the presenters. But if you'd like to do that, we'd really like to have you. So use contact at the Astro Imaging channel and get a hold of us, and we'll schedule you up for October 27th. Ann Zubladov is going to tell us about, it's scientific imaging. She's taking a survey of some galaxies, I think, and she wants some help. And a lot of us have the equipment that would be just fine for that kind of a program. On November 10th, Greg Beneke is going to be coming in. He's not up on the schedule yet because he hasn't given me his final title, but he's going to be doing an imaging presentation that he did at the imaging workshop at Nightfall last year about his growth through astro imaging. And these have always been some very popular programs where you take somebody who's a beginner and what mistakes he made in the first place, and then he decided he needed to rectify this or that or the other thing by doing this or that, or buy that piece of equipment, or give up on that piece of equipment. It's a pretty good show, and I saw it last year at Nightfall. And by the way, then we have AIC. You know about AIC by now. It's a pretty popular thing that's going on the West Coast, but it brings in people from all over the country. Tolga and Eric and I will be there for sure. And that's why we can't have a show, because we'll all be on the road or in an airplane or whatever we'll be doing coming back to you. At any rate, I want to remind you that we are still, if you go back to uh, showing the program here, which is okay. You can get on our Rumble Talk screen here, and you can make comments. But you can also make comments oh, that's changed since the last time I was there. Yeah, that shouldn't be on Trump. It should be on the Astro Imaging channel, and I don't know how it got there. Let's see. You can also go to YouTube, and on YouTube itself, let's get there, YouTube. You can make your comments and so forth and contribute to the conversation. Well, I guess it's not coming. At any rate, Roland has come to us tonight. He's going to tell us about, Roland is going to tell us about different kinds of software programs used to acquire information. Now, I call them session managers because what they do is they manage your session. I've always known a few astroimagers who love to sit there and watch their screens as they go through the night and tell it to take pictures and not take pictures and do this and that, the other. I've never understood that. It gets boring. I mean, if your guider's working, your guider's going to stay working. If it, you know, there's programs that can take over all that work while you grab your job and go out and look at the stars and do other things, watch football on TV or whatever it is you want to do. Well, Roland has used a lot of the programs that allow us to do something like that, and he's going to tell us about them all. Well, at least a bunch of them anyway. I don't know if he's going to tell them about all. Roland, are you ready out there?
I'm ready.
Okay, take it.
Okay, thank you, Alex, and good evening, everybody. Let me do the magic screen sharing button clicks here. All right. And you should be seeing my screen now, hopefully. Are we good?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tolga. All right, so yeah, as Alex said, tonight we're going to be talking about the different ways that, let me get rid of that little widget that popped up there, different ways to automate your imaging sessions. So I both use the phrase imaging automation software as well as session managers. And we're going to go through some definitions. I'll talk about a list of software. There's 8 different products that I've included in this survey. And then I'll take you through a typical night from automating a session from dusk to dawn and how each of these products plays in the course of the night. A little bit of a discussion of use cases and some decision factors. And then if we have time, we'll take some questions. So what's the difference between an imaging automation product and something that takes pictures? There are a lot of products like SharpCap or the camera add-on for the SkyX that can capture images for you, but they don't necessarily take the entire session from dusk to dawn and automate it for you. Whether you're there, not attended or unattended, doing all the startup and shutdown activities, and particularly being able to slew to and image multiple targets. So that's kind of my litmus test here, because I tried to keep this list down to a reasonable handful of products that do full automation, and being able to do multiple targets unattended with autofocus, guiding, managing meridian flips. Those were some of the key factors to get included in this list. I'm sure there are some other products out there I'm not aware of, but I think I've hit, this is probably the 80% most commonly used products. If you have an observatory, these products will also manage that for you. Most of them will. And most of them can also handle external events like clouds have rolled in, time to either stop for the night or suspend imaging for a while, and then start up again if the weather clears. I don't include polar alignment as a requirement to get on this list because, as far as I know, none of these will completely automate polar alignment, including adjusting your azimuth and altitude on your mount, unfortunately, because those are usually manual adjustments that you have to make. And we're also talking about DSOs, deep space objects here. We're not talking about planetary imaging. So if you're successful, an automated session manager basically gives you a robotic telescope. You can go to sleep, set things up, go to sleep, and wake up in the morning with a disk full of images, which is very nice. So let's look a little bit more at the anatomy of a session and what parts you play and what this new robotic assistant will do for you. So I look at it in these 4 major phases: planning, startup, the actual acquisition of your images, and the shutdown. And to start, the planning is really something that you're doing, but all these programs will assist you in some way with the planning, and we'll go through each of these in more detail. And then the automation starts with the big session manager block here with starting things up. So connecting the software, cooling your camera, opening up the observatory, and so forth, all the way through acquiring the images and shutting down at the end of the night. So all the session managers will do things in these areas. Then also we look at error handling. So what happens if some of these these processes don't work. Autofocus doesn't focus for you. Your Meridian flip stalls out. How do these programs handle the errors? Do they just quit? Do they time out? Do they have a recovery period, an automatic recovery? And do they notify you, perhaps send you a text message or an email or ring an alarm so you can get up and fix the problem? Then also on the right here, we look at the actions when external events say it's time to either suspend or resume or completely terminate and exit the imaging session for the night. And then the final factor is customization. So all these products have some degree of a graphical user interface, but many of them also allow you to write scripts or do a drag and drop sequence management and alter the sequence of the night to fit your particular purposes. So this is the high level view. Now we'll start going down into the next level of detail. These are the 8 products that I am considering. As Alex said, I've used all of these to some extent. The CCD Seal and Nina are 2 newer products which I have not run live. I have used them with simulators. All the other products I have run quite a bit in terms of all-night imaging sessions. So I have some experience with all of them. As you can see, price-wise, they range from totally free with the CCD Seal and Nina to lower price products that are in the $100 range to mid-priced all the way up to ACP and ACP Expert, which when you put together the mandatory additional software into the price, this gets you up to the $2,000 range. So quite a range here, free to $2,000. Very quickly, because obviously we have had and can spend an entire session on any one of these products and even just one aspect of it. If you characterize these products in a few sentences, ACP and ACP Expert, probably among the most mature product here on the list. I'd say sort of a medium pace of new feature development and bug fixes happening, widely used in observatory settings. Probably its big differentiator is the ACP Expert, which is a scheduling system. Talk a little bit more about that, but it's sort of results oriented. You can tell it what you want to get done, and it will get it done for you in terms of the targets and the frames you want to take for each target. So it's the most expensive, as I said, on the list, and it does require Maxim DL for camera and guiding, Focus Max, or there's a PlaneWave product for autofocus. Next, CCD Autopilot. It's also a mature product, kind of mid-paced in feature development and bug fixes, also used in observatories and remote situations. It has a very nice integration for planning with CCD Navigator, and it's sort of a mid-priced product, but it also requires commercial external software for camera and guiding. Next, CCD Seal. This is relatively new. The author of Cart to Seal has also started this program. It's changing pretty quickly. New features coming on. It's fairly impressive for a new piece of software. It has a GUI. It also has a scripting language, and it's free. CCD Commander. Tolga did a presentation on this one a while back on the Astro Imaging channel. It's different from all the rest of these, and it's also mature, very stable. They did come out with a bug fix release a while back when Windows, an OS update broke things. So it is still being supported. And Tolga did use it with his remote system, so it is possible to use for that. It has a GUI, but it's a drag and drop sequencer product. So it's not like many of these others with a full GUI that shows you everything that's going on. It's more of a control sequence part of the GUI. And it's also a low price. It's about $100. Nina, another newcomer on the scene relatively. It's also undergoing rapid development. It's got a GUI interface. As far as I know, it's not scriptable. It has a pretty nice built-in planner with images built in, DSO database, can do MOSAICS, and it's also free. It's a donationware, and it's open source. So as I believe this is the only open source product on this whole list. So you can, if you're a programmer, you can join the Nina team and write some code and help make it better. Prism, also a mature product. I'd say again, it's sort of a medium pace of development and bug fixes. It's also used in observatory settings. Its unique feature here is it's completely self-contained. You don't need any external software, just the drivers to connect up to your equipment. But everything is built in. The flip side of that is if you really want to use a program like Maxim, you can't use that with Prism. You or PhD2 for guiding, you can't use that with Prism. You have to use the features that are built into Prism. It also has a scripting language, and it's sort of a medium price with 3 different product levels available. Sequence Generator Pro, also reasonably mature, got a medium pace of development, primarily GUI. It does a little bit of an API, but really not a scripting-oriented product. People really like its framing and mosaic wizard on the planning side. Low priced, about $100, and it's also very widely used. Last one here is Voyager. It's a very mature product, 10 years of development, but it's also kind of an anomaly here in that it's still coming out with new feature releases at a pretty rapid pace. It's also used in an observatory setting, and it has both a GUI and a drag and drop sequencer. So the sequencer is sort of in the same character as CCD Commander, but it also can be used just from the GUI. It's also a low price product, about 129 euros. And recently, English language documentation just became available this year. So it's starting to show up more outside of Italy where it is written. So that's a lot of products. As I said, we've had sessions here on the channel on all of these. So how am I going to talk about all these products in an hour here?
Could you hold off for a second here? Do you have any questions come up yet on YouTube, Togo or Eric?
I don't see any questions yet.
Okay, I do have a question, and particularly while you're looking at that particular slide with the list of all the people that or all those software programs that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Could you please tell us which of these, maybe the other slide you had earlier, which had the prices on them,
Yeah.
would be more appropriate. My question is going to be, is that the package I need? Having paid the 95 to 295 for CCD Autopilot,
Yep.
do I need any other software that I've got to buy in order to make it work?
Yeah. So in that case, you do, and that as we go through this this presentation, as I go through each of the areas, like
Okay.
taking pictures, you'll see for CCD Autopilot, you have to have another product to actually take the pictures.
Okay. Okay. So that 95 to 295 is actually 95 to 295 plus that piece of software.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Good point. So I should be consistent here because I have that for ACP
Okay.
called out.
Okay. Thank you. But
But
we'll
it
get
is,
to it. We'll get to it when we get to
yeah,
it.
you will see it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So in this case, to keep this down to a reasonable amount of time, I'm going to talk about features and whether they're supported by, and obviously there's going to be some variations in how each of these products supports each feature. So this is an overview. It's really, my goal here is to just give you a way to think about how to evaluate these different products. And I have started a survey on my website, which has a little bit more detail than there is in this presentation. And these, new releases come out all the time, and I can't promise that the website will always be completely up to date. So, the ultimate convincer is the product website itself and their documentation. All right, so let's start with planning. All these products help you plan your session, and this is all stuff you're going to do, during the day, hopefully, not wasting good clear skies. And the most basic is target selection. So if you have an ID of a object, I want to go look at M42. They'll all let you type in M42 and they'll do some kind of a lookup. So they might use your favorite planetarium software. They might do an online lookup. They might have catalogs built in. So again, the detail of how they do that, I'll leave to the products, and I'm not going to read the supported by lists. You can see those in the presentation. Next, and this is a kind of a nice thing to be able to do. If you have an existing image that you took, a few nights ago, and you don't remember what the coordinates were exactly, the products will let you do a plate solve on the image, which tells you what the coordinates are and the position angle, so that you can set up your plan to take that exact same target again in that exact same framing. So that's handy. And then some of these products do let you automatically import targets from planning software. So some of them are very tightly integrated. So you can not only build your plan in something like CCD Navigator or Sky Tools Imaging or any of these products, and then also after the end of the night, go back to the planning tool with your results. So in other words, if in CCD Navigator you said, I want to take 100 frames of M42, and at the end of the night you successfully took 50, it would update the project and say you still have 50 more to go. So when the next night comes around, that's what you'd set up. And so once you've decided that you want to image a particular target, it's nice to be able to have a visual representation of that target, that area of sky, with an overlay of your field of view, and then be able to drag that around until you like the way it looks and say, okay, that's the picture I'm trying to take. So several of these products do have built in a framing wizard. SGPs is very popular, as I mentioned earlier. And some of the ones, in addition to the three I list here, also will support framing in another tool. So if you use the SkyX, you can use its framing tool and then automatically import those coordinates to some of the other packages here. So once you've framed the target and you know what you want to shoot, then becomes the question of, well, when should you shoot it? Do you want to shoot it as soon as it rises above your local horizon? Do you want to wait until it's close to the meridian? Do you want to image that target all night, or just for a couple hours when it's highest in the sky? So again, all of these products to varying degrees allow you to specify constraints for when you start and stop. The most manual intensive for you would be if it just said, hey, you can start at this time and end at that time, and you need to go to your planning software to figure out what the right times ought to be for when that object is even visible or optimal. Some of the other products will have constraints that are a little more fluid. So, relative to the meridian hour angle, you might be able to say, I just want to image between an hour before the meridian and an hour after the meridian, and let the software figure out what that is on any given night. So that takes some of the planning burden off of you. So again, all of these, you really have to go either to my website or to the documentation, but these are things to keep in mind, because once you get all this set up and running, the products are going to be pretty good about running your system all night. And then you're going to find that your time, in addition to processing the images, which is probably the biggest time left, but your time goes into planning. And anything that makes the planning process easier is going to be a benefit for you in the long run. And if you like to do mosaics, they're also a little tricky, because you need to decide, for this target, how many frames do I need to take, and what should the coordinates be of each frame, so that when I put them all together in my image processing software, I've got one big image. And so some of these products, again, include mosaic planning built in. Some of the other ones will allow you to import mosaics that you planned in an external product. And there are some free mosaic planners out there available. So it requires a little more manual work, that you'd have to use the product to plan your mosaic, and then copy and paste the coordinates in to the program. But it is possible to do with any of these. And now the big daddy of all of this is the automated scheduling approach, which ACP does. And this is part of the reason that ACP can justify, I think, its higher price. Very different approach to planning. Basically, here you say, these are all the targets that I want to shoot. And for each of these targets, here's the frames I want to get, the filters I want to use, the exposures, the binning, and so forth. And you just keep feeding these into the ACP scheduler database. And then as the night progresses, every so often, as one of your little projects here finishes, and typically you'll make these little chunks of work to be maybe 30 to 60 minutes long. when one finishes, ACP will say, okay, what time is it? What's up? You know, what are the current coordinates of the meridian, and decide what to run next, and automatically pick one of these projects and run it. So you don't really know in advance what's going to run, but it's going to try to make some optimal decisions about what is best positioned to run, or perhaps which of your targets are westmost and are not going to be available much longer, so you better get them while they're still available. So this is a very different approach, and I know some of the other imaging acquisition products have talked about working on similar functionality. So I hope they do. I think it's a pretty exciting way to do your imaging. So that's planning. So you do all that before you push any buttons to start the night. Now let's talk about the next phase, which is the startup. So as I mentioned earlier, in order to run a session from dusk to dawn, your mount has to be polar aligned, and that's going to require some manual intervention on your part. So you either have a permanent setup, or you have a place where you can leave your equipment set up and maybe cover it. I cover mine up with a Telegizmo's 365 cover, so I don't have to repolar align very often. And then you need your computer running the session manager to be powered up, and then pretty much everything else that has to be done can be done by the session manager software. Even turning the power on to your gear. So in the best case, you could leave everything set up. You've got an observatory, leave it all powered on, and day after day, this thing would come up and start running at the right time and get images if the weather is good for imaging. So first step, of course, you have to power up and connect to your hardware. Most of all these products will support ASCOM, Alpaca, and Indy for some of them. And you connect to all your hardware listed here. And then on the camera side, a lot of them will have native drivers in addition to the ASCOM drivers, and then there's some cameras that don't even have ASCOM drivers available, or at least not official ones. So this is a pretty important area to check to make sure that your particular gear is supported in the way that you want it to be by the imaging software, because in some cases the ASCOM driver might not support all the features that a native driver does. And then it becomes important to know that your software will have native support for your camera. And then in addition to supporting to the hardware, for the products that require, and this is Alex, I guess the answer to your question about which of these products require camera, third-party software for camera, for example, ACP, CCD Autopilot, and CCD Commander all require that you have a piece of external software to manage the camera. Similar for guiding, half of them support PHD2, which is a no-charge guiding product. Prism has built-in guiding, so you do get that with the product, but the rest of these here require a paid piece of software to do guiding. Voyager is kind of interesting in that it does both. It'll support PHD2, which is free, but it also works with the SkyX and Maxim DL. And there are people who prefer to use the SkyX or Maxim DL, so that's a nice differentiator. Next, we need to hook up to our plate solvers, and this is another area of differentiation. There's some very good free plate solvers and some very good paid ones. I've used all of them here. They all work. I think you've heard Tolga say the SkyX's plate solver is pretty exceptionally good. Pinpoint comes from the same guy that makes ACP, Bob Denny, who's been on the channel. And so this is another area where some of these products require an external paid piece of software to do plate solving. There's also support in most of these for the most popular online blind plate solver, which is nova.astrometry.net. If you have an observatory and a roll-off roof, it's definitely almost a mandatory feature that the software will be able to open and close and rotate a dome and stay in sync with the mount position, and also manage the observatory under weather conditions. So if the clouds come in, you want to suspend imaging and resume. There's also a variable which I call smart resume, which is clouds rolled in at midnight. It got clear at 3 a.m. The target you were imaging at midnight has set. What does the software do? Does it go back to that same target and try to image it? Does it just give up for the night? Or does it say, let's skip ahead until we find something that's available? And there are variations here with these products in terms of how smart they are at resuming your session. Some of them will just pick up where they left off, and if the target's not available, that'll cause an error. All right, now we get to the meat. Finally, we can actually start taking some pictures. So in our planning phase, we set up constraints for when to shoot each image. So now the image automation software will, execute the plans that we put together that afternoon or earlier that day. And for each target, you want to start and stop at the right time. And if you say, I want to get 100, 5-minute frames, and the target's only available for an hour, obviously the software's got to be smart enough to say time's up, and then gracefully move on to the next target if there is one, regardless, of the fact that you didn't get everything done that you planned. Also, we want to be able to get to that framing that we set up earlier in the planning session, where we said, okay, here's the coordinates we want to center on, and we need the software to be able to control that. So it does it by something we call precision pointing, and it's a iterative process where it will slew your mount to the target, take a picture, plate solve the picture, which says, okay, here's the actual place your scope is pointing, and then compare that to the target that you specified and say, okay, is this error acceptable? Because you might have said, hey, anything within 50 arc seconds is I'm happy with, or a few arc minutes I'm happy with. That's close enough. And then re-slew to correct the error, and then repeat the whole process, plate solve, and make sure you got to where you needed to go. So all of these products can do this. Some of them can also handle this for the position angle. So if you have an automatic rotator, it will also figure out the position angle that you're at and move your rotator to compensate and get you the exact image that you set up that afternoon when you were planning. And we need to autofocus. And sometimes people will autofocus before they do the precision pointing, but usually your scope is close enough that the plate solving will work, even if the stars are a little bit blurry. But before you take the images, you got to make sure you're in focus. And there are two major approaches to doing autofocus. One I call the single star, where your scope will slew to a particular star, and some of these products will keep a database of nearby bright enough stars that will serve for automatic focus. And this tends to be a little faster because it can go to a bright star, take shorter exposures, but it's also going to give you the sharpest focus right in the middle of the field. So if you're imaging a galaxy, a planetary nebula, something that's more concentrated to the middle, this is a great approach. If your field is super flat, this is a great approach. If you're trying to image something that extends across the whole field, like a nebula, sometimes the multi-star across the field is best, because it's going to give you the best average focus across the whole field. And when you look at these packages, consider what are the conditions that will trigger autofocus, because you don't want to just focus once for the night. Some of them will support every 30 minutes, every 60 minutes. You pick a time interval. Some will do it every number of exposures. On filter change, pretty much everybody will allow you to refocus. Filter offsets are a little controversial, where you determine, my red filter and my green filter are always 50 focuser steps apart. So, I'll just move when I change from red to green, I'll just move 50 steps. Some people don't like that. They'd rather just run the autofocus. Similarly for temperature compensation, which says my focus, as it cools or heats up, my focus changes by a set amount, and I'm just going to automatically move the focuser to compensate. But again, that's tricky and doesn't always work. Just to cut to the bottom line there. So when you look at the autofocus area, this is another area where some of the software has built-in autofocus routines. Some of them require an external product, and some of them work with both. Again, Voyager here is unique in having a built-in autofocus, but also working with external software. And guiding. So now we also want our software, our session manager, to manage our guiding if we are using guiding. So it needs to know when to start and stop. It has to be able to either select the guide star or let the guiding software do the selection. And again, Prism, as I mentioned, is totally self-contained. So it does not require any external software. It has guiding built in. Some of these products work with free external software, PhD2 being the most popular. And some of them require paid external guiding software. You also want to look at how these software packages manage calibration of your guider. Can they do a calibration run at any point in the night if you choose to? How do they manage dithering, which is moving the scope a little bit to eliminate hot pixels when you stack your images later? And how do they recover from guiding failures? So this is particularly important because guiding sometimes doesn't work all night long without a problem. Clouds come in, star is moved out of the field, and you want a product that can recover from that, usually just by restarting guiding. And again, here's the meat. The reason we're doing all this is actually taking the exposures. All of these products, of course, have a way to come up with a list of your targets, and for each target specify the filters if you're using a monochrome camera, and the exposure length, the binning, and on and on. Some of these are purely sequential products, lists where you will say, let's do first this target, then that target, then the next target, in this exact order, and I'm done. Some of them will allow you to loop back around. So that's kind of a handy feature. Being able to loop back is good if you say you're at a dark site and you want to get RGB images and you want to take, say, maybe 10 of each and then cycle back and take 10 more of each until the night's done. You don't want to risk all your travel to a dark site and take 3 hours of red and then it gets cloudy and now you only got as red images for the night. So the cycling back can be good. And then another differentiator here is whether the software keeps track of how many exposures you've successfully taken, and it knows not only to stop when the goal is reached, but if you have to resume your sequence, it doesn't start all the way over from the beginning. And that again varies from product to product. The dreaded Meridian flip. This sends fear into the heart of imagers worldwide. So this is when you're the point at which your scope says, okay, assuming you have a German equatorial mount, I can no longer continue moving any further in the same direction from on the right ascension, and I have to flip over so I can start imaging with my my mount on the opposite side of the pier. So this is can range from being incredibly frustrating and tricky to set up to being trivial, depending on your experience and your mount software. And this is one area where you can actually have equipment damage occur if you don't get it right, because you can have a pier crash, which is not a good thing, where your part of your camera system generally will hit the pier or your tripod. So you need to test this during the day. There's no reason you can't set everything up with the imaging software and do a Meridian flip simulation during the day. and watch it very carefully with your finger on the off button to be able to stop if it's not working the way it should. But everybody, all these products do support automating this Meridian flip. It's just an area where you need to exercise extra caution and make sure that it is working well before you set up your system and go to sleep. Calibration frames. So in addition to taking the light frames, we need to take dark and bias frames. Usually you don't take those very often, but all of these products will take dark and bias frames, and they will all take flats using a light panel. Some of them will also automate taking sky flats, which is a nice capability, especially if you're portable or you're at a remote site and you don't want to hassle with a flat panel. These will slew to the right spot in the sky for your sky flats, automatically adjust the exposure length based on the ADU that you specified thither. And it really makes flats pretty painless. I use this feature myself now, and I just take both dusk and dawn flats, and they work fine. Some of them will also maintain a library of all your calibration frames and even apply them on the fly. So as you get new light frames coming in with external software, you can do the calibration of the light frames and have fully calibrated frames waiting for you in the morning. And now we get to the end of the night. How do we shut down? And then a couple of sidebars on notifications and customization. So the end of the run, or when you have a weather event that requires a shutdown, you need to be able to do a series of things. And this, in almost all cases, needs to be something you can customize. So you want to be able to say which of these tasks is important and what has to be done in your particular situation. Park the mount, close the roof or the dome, warm up your camera. If you have a flip flat or a dust cover that needs to be closed, close that. And if it's the end of the whole session, disconnect and power down. And in some cases, particularly in a fixed observatory, you might have a light panel that's stuck on the wall. I think we saw some of those in Tolga's walkthrough last week of Deep Sky West. And you want to be able to point the scope at the panel, turn it on, take your flats, then turn it off. So all these things, plus the ability to run an external program, because you just might have something custom in your environment that needs to be run as part of the shutdown sequence. Notifications. So all along here, we've been talking about things like everything always goes perfectly, which unfortunately is not always the case. So if something goes wrong in the night, you want to be able to have a notification that wakes you up. And this is usually done by one of three ways: a text message, an email, or there's something called the Good Night system that Lunatico Astronomica puts out, which runs a program on your cell phone, and it'll start hooting like an owl if something goes wrong. And I can just tell you, your dogs will get very excited the first time that happens in the middle of the night. All right, customization. So they said all these products can automate a session, and they all have varying degrees of ability for you to specify what you want to have happen in one order, or what additional things you want to have happen that the author might not have thought about. So they all have GUIs that let you turn things on or off. Start guiding, slew to target, yes, no, center the target, yes, no. I have a rotator, so forth. Some also have the ability to call out to external programs. Like this is from CCD Autopilot, and you see the run 3 and the run 4 boxes, and that's where you can click the browse button, pick an external program or script to run, and it will run it at that point in the session. But the ultimate in flexibility is either a scripting language that you can use or a drag and drop sequencer. So on the left here, you see CCD Commander's drag and drop sequencer, which lets you pick a series of actions, drag them on the palette into your action list, and then double click and change some of the parameters of that action. On the right, you see the scripting language, which is a programming language, in this case, Prisms, which gives you total flexibility, but requires a little bit more of a programmer mindset than the drag and drop ones do. All right, so that's a real ton of information. Taking a drink from a fire hose here. How do you decide what to use? Well, in my case, I looked at it and said, well, first of all, which products support my hardware, the software I want to use, and have the features that I really care about. If I don't have a rotator, I don't care about rotator support. If I have a camera that has no ASCOM drivers, then I really care about native drivers. So things like that are going to probably narrow the field for you right off the bat. Second is budget. We have everything from freeware to $2,000 or more. So, does it fit your budget? And then honestly, you can read until you're totally confused. I say forums are great, but people are going to defend whatever it is they use that they like, or they're going to trash something that they use that they're currently having trouble with. So I think the best way, and this is how I ended up with so many products on my disk here, is download the demos, run through the tutorials, run some live sessions. Almost all these products have a trial period, and see if you like using them. Because it's really not only using them during the night, but also going through a few planning cycles and seeing how easy it is to plan things the way you like to do your planning. So, you might have a favorite planetarium software that you're comfortable with, and you want to make sure it's easy to pick your targets in that software, and then send them over to the imaging software to run. Do you need extra licenses, or do you already have Maxim DL? If you have a Paramount, you have the SkyX already. It's a great product. Are you going to run attended or unattended? Even though these products will run your system from dusk to dawn, a lot of people still like to sit and watch. As Alex said, some people find it boring. Other people find it fascinating to just watch the pictures rolling in. So if you're on the unattended side, then the notification, really strong recovery, and probably handling weather events becomes even more critical. And double that if you're doing remote imaging. Then think about your style. Are you the type of person that likes to just sit on one target for many nights until you get a ton of data, or do you want to go through and just do as many targets as you can in a single night? And how hard it is to set up becomes a critical issue there if you want to do a lot of targets. Do you like external planning software? Next week we're going to see Greg Krinklaw from SkyTools 4 presenting. I've been using his product for quite some time now, and being able to integrate that with your session manager is important. Or do you like the ACP scheduler approach, which is pretty different from everything else here, where you just load everything up and let it go? And all of these can do MOSAICS, but some of them make it easier than others. So if you're a big fan of doing MOSAICS, you might find yourself having a bias toward those products. So in my case, I had ACP Expert running on one peer, and I decided to set up a second peer, honestly, as much as anything, just to be able to play with these different packages and try them out. And at that point, I didn't want to buy a whole new set of ACP Expert software stack. I wanted to use PhD2 for guiding. I had a Paramount, so I already had the SkyX. And on the weather side, it was important to me that not only could I suspend and resume, I have an AAG cloud watcher, and I wanted the signal from that to not only stop when the clouds rolled in, but resume and do it in a smart way. And so all these factors kind of narrowed the funnel for me down to deciding to use Voyager on the second peer. But again, everybody has different key factors. So this is just an example, and I think it's important for you to think about this whole area again as a framework. So good luck with your search. I think there's no bad choices in this whole batch. They all work well. They're just different in terms of of how they work, whether they fit your hardware, your software, and your style. That's the end of the formal presentation. If there are any questions.
That's a really great job you did there. I did a little program on SGP, maybe the second year of the Astro Imaging channel, and I did like 1/10 of what you did as far as comparing the other programs. And I just want to commend you on the way you got just a lot of information presented in a very orderly, intelligible way. So
Thank
congratulations
you,
on
Alex.
that. Now, I got a question for you.
Shoot.
I people often ask me for recommendations as to which software to use, and I generally suggest that you use SGP because it works for me real well, and I haven't really tried the others. And frankly, I've been doing that for before the others were kind of around anyway, Nina and some of the others. Um, and the objection is raised, oh, but then I have to get PhD and I have to get this and that, the other thing. And I don't want to use all those different programs. I just want one program to do it all. Could you react to that? How do you answer that question?
Well, if that's the case, there's only really one choice here, which is Prism. So,
That's
uh,
what I say too. I say there isn't any such thing as
yeah,
one program does it all. You're even Maxim, um, call it has its own guiding stuff, but it's a separate subroutine that
yeah,
doesn't
and it's
exactly match everything else that Maxim does,
that's
but
right.
everything calls on something else.
Yeah, I mean it's a mixed blessing. And I think there are people who absolutely prefer being able to use different external programs because they like them. I've used
Mhm.
Maxim for the last 10 years, and that's what I want to use. I don't want to switch. And if the software doesn't support Maxim, I'm not going to use it. And then there are people, at the other end of the spectrum who say, I don't want to use anything that costs anything. So I want all free and all in one. So it's a personal choice. They're all valid choices, but again, if you want something that's completely standalone, Prism right now is the only thing on the market.
Okay. Are there other questions over there? Rumble Talk is empty.
There are a few comments. You want me to read them off, Alex?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Ryan said, would love to see ACP's auto target selection in SGP. Love SGP, but the planning can be a pain sometimes.
Yeah.
Just a comment. And then right after that, Alexander said it also controls DOM scripting, intelligent scheduling, internal focusing. I'm not sure if he's referring to ACP or SGP, but that was a comment earlier. Let's go back. Give me a moment to find the next comment, or I can't find it. Hang on. Oh, Voyager is coming out very soon with a web-based interface.
It
That
is.
was George.
Yeah, they've done a technology preview of that, and they're providing HTTP protocol into the application server that's embedded in Voyager. And then another guy on the team is building a web interface that'll make HTTP calls. So you won't have to set up a separate web server. Similar to the way ACP works, it has a built-in web server capability, and you'll be able to manage some things remotely over the web as long as you can get through the firewalls to where Voyager is running.
And Alex also said that CCDCL is also open source.
Okay. Good.
Those are all the comments.
Yeah, CCD Seal has got some cool things. I was just looking at it the other day. One of the things that I thought was kind of a mini scheduling, and they have a video on this, is you can load up a bunch of targets and use the hour angle as your constraint. So you could say, plus or minus 2 hours, all the messier objects, and loop. And it will just keep looping through all the messier objects just to and image the ones that are within 2 hours plus or minus of the meridian. So, and obviously it doesn't have to be just messier objects. It could be any list or arbitrary list of objects. So I thought that was kind of a neat trick.
Roland, could you take us to your website and show us what you got over there?
Sure. Let's see.
Don't forget to share screen.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to get the right screen up first. Let's see.
I understand you've done a survey already, and you've got so you've got stuff already marked up in their survey. I guess that's kind of one of the things I'd like to see.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Okay.
All right. I think it's showing now. Looks kind of gray in mine. Is that legible?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay. So yeah, so on my my website at tourstar.net, if you go under imaging software, this is where I just started making this table a few months ago, where a lot of the similar information is here. I also included Maxim and the SkyX in this list, and I haven't put in CCD, Seal, and Nina yet. The reason I included Maxim and the SkyX was because a lot of these products require them. So when you say, oh, it requires Maxim DL for a camera, then if you go to the cameras section, you can find out more about, well, what does Maxim DL actually support? And Maxim DL supports Andertech, AO adapter, Apogee, Celestron Direct, blah, blah, blah.
Great.
And, does it support, who supports QSI Direct or S Big Direct? Well, yes or no. So again, I first looked at all this information when I thought about what to do in this presentation. And obviously it would be even more boring if I sat here and tried to read through all these tables. So I can just point you at these tables, which I will continue to update. And hopefully the presentation format was enough to at least whet your appetite.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was real good. Okay. Eric, you're breaking up.
Roland, are you familiar with a product called
Couldn't quite get that. I heard my name.
Eric? Well, that wasn't Eric, I guess.
No,
Eric's.
that wasn't. I'm not sure what.
Oh, okay.
Roland was a product called Button.
I think Eric's off on personal business right now.
He's a Borg. He's a Borg.
Okay.
Yeah. If anybody could understand and relay the question, but I couldn't quite get it.
I think he's doing some other stuff at home.
Okay. Got it.
Got in
We're
the way
just
of the
gonna
answer.
crosstalk.
Okay. I think we've got all the comments, we got all the questions, right? And remember, Roland, to hang in there even after we sign off. Are we ready to sign off, everybody? Then I'm going to say good night for the night, and hope you all enjoyed that. I know I'm going to have to go back and reread it, particularly before I talk to anybody else about SGP and everything else that there is to do. It really, guys, if you are not using some session manager already, you need to get into it, because you're spending a lot of time that you don't need to spend. There are an awful lot of us that just sleep through the night while the computer's out taking care of everything for us. And Roland has shown us an awful lot tonight about how we can get into that. It doesn't cost very much, particularly considering how much you've already spent on all that other equipment you got out there. So please get into it. And Tolga, if there's nothing else to do out there, can you take us out?
Absolutely. Good night, all, and thanks for coming. And don't forget to donate. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.